Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon for those of you on the East Coast. We are so excited to welcome Jon here today, who has started his own recruitment agency, his own business. Very excited to dive into all things recruiting and really pull back the curtain. So, welcome today, Jon. So happy to have you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Of course, of course. So, if we can, for our listeners, so they hear a little bit more from you, if you can give us a little bit more on your
Mhm.
background and what you're up to now.
Sure. So I was the career recruiter. I worked kind of as a recruiter out of college, and both in the recruiting agency and staffing agency, and then I worked at corporate recruiting at Google. So kind of bit of everything. At that point, I kind of got felt like I got the hang of recruiting, so I started my own recruiting business. Just kind of went out for my own and figured it out kind of through trial and error, kind of the hard way, but then had success. Eventually, sold my agency to my partner. And then around that time, a lot of old coworkers of mine were reaching out to ask for tips and tricks on how to start their own agency. I think they saw that I was doing well. They were kind of ready to branch out on their own, right? And so through coaching, I saw that I was able to help them get success way faster than it took me figuring out on my own. And that kind of evolved into a coaching business. And now we actually evolved into a program called Recruiting Accelerator. We've been around for about 3 years, and we've helped over 200 people now start their own profitable recruiting business using a lot of LinkedIn automation strategies, email marketing, things that you don't learn as a recruiter, right? How to run a business, business operations, sales. A lot of recruiters say, hey, I'm really good at finding candidates, but finding clients and selling a VP level hiring manager and why they should work with me and negotiating fee agreements, that's all very can be daunting and scary. So then we can help with the client acquisition piece of it and biz ops. And then and then we guarantee that as long as you follow our process, you'll make your first recruiting deal, right? Within the 6 months of the program or less. So that's kind of what we do.
That's amazing. That's fantastic. So what really drew you, I guess, to make that shift into wanting to do it on your own? What was that like moment? Was there a moment for you that was like,
Yeah. Yeah, the moment was, well, I was recruited to be a first hire or this really well established recruiting agency in San Francisco where they were doing sales and admin staffing, and they wanted to branch out to tech recruiting, right? Tech's hot in San Francisco, and so I was the first hire, built a whole team up. We were doing well, and then when one day I walked in, the moment I decided to start my own recruiting agency is when my boss said, "Hey, Jon, we're laying off the entire division." So I got laid off. I wish I would have said I had the guts to just storm off, kind of pull a Jerry Maguire, right? Like to take a goldfish and take one of the employees. But no, I think like most recruiters I talk to, it's a bit it was in the back of my mind for a couple of years. Especially when you compare what you bill for your agency owner and what you take home in your paycheck, there's a huge disparity, and eventually kind of starts getting soul crushing. So I always thought, but I just never had the guts. I think most people, I was like most people, just felt comfortable in this nest, had fears, doubts. I was risk averse to a degree. But when I got pushed out, I'm like, okay, well, shoot, I actually called my top two clients at the time. I was doing both client and candidate work. So that's called a full cycle or 360 recruiter. So I was doing everything. I was getting clients, I was getting candidates, I was managing the whole interview process, I was doing everything. So that's kind of why I was like, wait, I'm doing all the work. Why am I still giving like half of the fees I earned to the agency owner? I was like making my boss rich, right? So I called my top two clients and they said, hey, that sucks. Sorry about the bad news, but like we want to keep working with you. Why don't you start your own thing? Right. So two clients said that. I'm like, okay, well, wow, thank you. And that gave me the courage. So later that weekend, I just came up with an LLC, put together a quick website, and I took my old boss's like recruiting service agreement and took out their name, put in my name. I just sent it over, and it came back signed. I'm like, well, I guess I'm in business now officially. So I figured I give myself 3 months. Let's give 3 months. I got unemployment coming in. I can survive barely, right? And then I made a placement within like 6 weeks. I'm like, okay. And in recruiting, when you make a placement, you place a candidate, you don't get paid like on the spot. You get paid typically 30 days after the candidate starts work. So I'm like, well, I got to stick around for 30 days to get my paycheck. And then within there, made another placement, and that kind of turned to 5 years, right? Until I eventually was like, okay, you know what? It's time to do something different here. And I really fell in love with coaching. And that's how I made the transition after that. So it kind of happened, in that random way.
right, nice domino effect, and that's fantastic. And you mentioned that with them
Yeah.
you found that, they had success on much that much faster, or that it just you were giving the advice to them and they were able to succeed. So what kind of advice would you give to someone then who maybe is with a recruiting agency right now looking to branch out, whether they're starting a recruiting agency, a recruiting business, or
Mhm.
just a business in general? What are some of the things you learned the hard way that you'd say, hey, this is what you got to do?
Oh, sure. So I think one, yeah, because I mean, I kind of like given the proverbial like easy button, right? But I'd say one for people who are thinking about doing it. Uh, People think it's like either all or nothing. Like you have to quit your job and start your own recruiting business full time or not. And that's such a scary gap to jump that they don't realize that you can actually just do it part time on the side, kind of make it a side hustle. Basically, right? There's ways to do it because you don't want to like, get in trouble and you don't want to advertise on LinkedIn and you want to kind of we have a method called stealth mode. So you can kind of run under the radar, while make sure you don't step on anyone's toes. And especially a lot of recruiting agencies make employees sign like a non-compete or they're afraid of conflict of interest. So I think that fear mostly stops people. They're like, oh, I don't want to get in trouble, right? Little they know that most of those are either non-enforceable, it's not a big deal, and especially they can like target different niches, target different geographies. Like it's easy to work around if they just kind of like explored it more, or had some help with that. So I think just getting started part time, seeing how they like it, and ideally like trying to do a whole deal, like get a client, get a candidate. And if you're a recruiter already, you probably already know how to get a candidate. Like you do that full time, right? So you're very confident about that. It's just reaching out to potential clients and seeing if you can help them with their hiring needs, right? And then once you have your first placement done, and you see, and for a lot of people who don't know the recruiting agency fee structure, it's typically 20% of your candidate's first year salary. So you're replacing 100K candidate, that's $20,000. So the moment, like I've never had anybody get a $20,000 check, especially two, and who hasn't quit their job and went all in. Like they see an extra $40,000 in their account and they're like, oh my gosh, this is real. I did this part time, like with 2 hours a day, right? So what would I make if I went full time? And then usually then they go all in. So I'd say just kind of dip your toes in the water and figure out ways to kind of do it and test. Yeah, you don't have to just wait until you get laid off like me, or have all your ducks in a row, because your ducks will never all be in a row, right? You just kind of have to go out there and get started.
Oh, that's amazing. Thank you for the advice. That's great. Definitely makes sense.
Yeah.
With,
Yeah.
with making that transition, were there things that you found that you wanted to do differently than, the agencies were doing, like on how you wanted to handle placements or fees or structures?
Yeah, that's probably like the other than like the money part of like, hey, I stopped feeling like it was fair that like I was doing all the work and getting like just the crumbs, right, of the cookie. So that was like the number one pain that I was experiencing. And this should resonate to most recruiters who've been doing it for a while, or even corporate recruiters that just burnt out by like working at one company. But then the second pain was all the like the parts of the job that I didn't like the meetings that were like long, and we'd be in 2 hour meetings where like everyone would go and report on their jobs and their status and all the candidates, and like I'd just be there for like an hour and a half meeting to like talk for 5 minutes. I'm like, this is so stupid. I should be out there, like this is not making me more money, right? I can go out there and make more hires. And then reports and like my manager would be like, hey John, we need you to submit more candidates to jobs. Even though they're not perfect, just send more volume, because the regional manager is looking at our candidate to submittal ratio. So I was like submitting like this stupid candidate. I'm like, oh, okay, just begin. This is really dumb. And so all these metrics. So that was another pain that I had, was like, I wish if I could do it my way, I would kind of trim all the fat, remove all these like non-revenue generating activities, and just focus on like getting clients and getting candidates. I think the third pain was like just lack of control, right? Like lack of control, because as a recruiter, you get assigned a job. They're like, hey, Canaria, here's a client. We got you. Here's the job. Go and hunt for the candidate, regardless of if it's even reasonable. Like, so a lot of times these clients will be like, okay, offering like, like below market value salary. They're looking for a unicorn, has this or that, and they're not that really urgent to hire. So then I'm spinning my wheels. And as a recruiter, either agency or in-house corporate recruiter, you're not allowed to just like quit. You can't just like say, like I'm done, or like I gave it a shot, but I couldn't find any way. You have to keep working on it forever until like your boss says, okay, like you can stop now. So I always had a dream of like, I wish I could just pick my clients, and the moment they start being difficult or unreasonable or unresponsive, I can just be like, you know what, let's just kind of part ways and like walk away from bad clients. But once I branched it on my own, I realized I could do all three. I could keep all the fees I earned that I worked hard for, 100% of it. I didn't have to share it with the boss or the house, and then I could do things my way and like not have random meetings. I just really focus on things that are going to just get me more money, which is get more clients, get more candidates, and just rinse, wash, repeat. And lastly, I could just walk away from bad clients. Like I can only work. It was great just being able to only work with clients that like respected me, trusted me, saw me as like a partner, a recruiting arm of their business versus some like random vendor, right? And I think you with your app, a lot of hiring managers, yeah, they I'm sure they have vendors and they work with different recruiting agencies. So later on, we could definitely talk about that relationship. But I just want to have the good relationships where like I could call a hiring manager, be like, hey, like how'd you like Sally? And then we can just right get good feedback, move quickly, and get the job done and get the seat filled. So yeah, it was actually nice to be able to have that relationship with the right clients and then be able to like then also work wherever I wanted to. I traveled a lot, so I can that laptop lifestyle that you see on Instagram that people are like on the hammock on the beach, like it's actually kind of true. Like I do it all the time. And because clients don't care like where you are, candidates don't care where you are, right? I think that's another misconception too. People think, well, I live in like Michigan, so I can only target Michigan clients. I have to work in my like location because they need to work with local recruiters. But that's not true. Like 80% of the deals I've placed on my own agency, I've never met the client. They're just all over the country. Like I'm here in San Francisco, but they don't care where you are, and they don't care about the name of your company. They don't care really about your name. They don't care about how long you've been in business. They don't care about how long you've been recruiting. All hiring managers care about is, do you have a rock star candidate for them? So as long as you can just show up with a candidate, like you're in the door, right? So I think that's another big fear too. They're like, well, I just been recruiting for 8 months or a year and a half. Like, why would someone choose to work with me versus like the big Randstads or Nelsons or the Robert Halfs of the world, these large recruiting businesses, right, with all these resources. But at the end of the day, just want to know that you got something for them, right?
Absolutely. And two things off that I want to touch on. You mentioned about working with clients that are the better clients, want to be respected, want to have good relationships. You said it with the utmost confidence. So how can you give advice or, how do you handle sort of walking away from a client that maybe isn't respecting you, or maybe that is no longer in touch and they're not a good fit for your company? Because I'm a firm believer that vendors, people you work with, they're an extension of you. So, how can you sort of separate from that and do so in a confident manner and a professional manner?
Yeah, it's funny. Like on our coaching calls, and we have myself and we have three other coaches on my team. So we have like a whole roster of head coaches, each with our different specialties. But like we get that question a lot, like, oh, this I want to stop working with this client, but how do I let them know? And it's like you could just ghost them if you wanted to. Like they don't care. Like if they stopped, if like if I'm a hiring manager and you sent 4 follow-up emails about like you submitted three candidates that you worked hard to find, and you haven't heard back from me after 3 or 4 emails, and now those candidates are off the market, and now you're like, there's no obligation to like. It's kind of like dating. I make that analogy a lot between dating and recruiting. It's very similar, right? Or dating and sales, because like yeah, if someone like no shows you flakes on a date, like you don't have to like follow up. You don't have to write them a formal like breakup. You can just be like, I'm not talking to this person anymore. And with recruiting, most of the recruiting deals are what's called contingency recruiting or contingency fees, where like there's no money up front, there's no obligation up front, and only if the hiring manager hires your candidate would they pay a one-time fee, which is that 20% or so of the salary. So because it's like a contingent agreement, you're not obligated, right? On the other hand, if you have a retained agreement where they do pay you some upfront, some amount of money upfront, then you're on the hook, right? Then you can't really break up with them unless you like give them back their money, right? So, and no one wants to do that. So,
Right.
yeah. So, that's it. But but if you were to, but at a high level, right, the ideal way is right. So it's a spectrum from like one, you can just ghost them. Two is you can just let them know upfront that setting expectations, right? Like really it begins like this whole analogy of like when it's like don't look where you fell, look at where you slip. If you slipped on a banana peel, right, you slip on a banana peel and you like slip and you land, it's not actually where you landed it's a problem, it's where you slipped. So where you slipped, most people slip as a recruiter, and I think this works both ways as a hiring manager too, is in the beginning of the call, before I agree to like work with you and help you find candidates and recruit for you, I'll actually set expectations, right? I'll say, hey, Katerina, look, I'll tell you what, I'm going to really focus, give you my best attention, dedicate all the resources, tap my network, do everything I can to find you these candidates that you've been looking for. You said for the last 3 months, and it's been really challenging. I'll give you my best work. All I ask in return is just you can be responsive. If I submit a candidate, if you can get back to me within 24 hours, you can say, yes, it's fine. No, it's fine. But like, if I don't hear back from you, that makes this really hard, because here's the deal. Or I'll say right now, as you know, rock star candidates, they have a very short shelf life. right? If I catch somebody and they're great, they might be on the market for like 2 weeks tops, and that's assuming I catch them at the beginning of their interview process, right? Sometimes I catch them in the middle, and we have like 4 days. So if I sell the candidate on your company, why they should even interview there and work there, and if they follow up with me and they say, "Hey, John, I'm really excited about that company you told me about yesterday. Have you heard back from them?" If I say, "You know what, I'm still waiting to hear back from the hiring manager," that candidate might misinterpret your radio silence for lack of interest, and then they might go and just move on to other opportunities. Like I kind of paint that picture, right? I'm always framing it in their best interest. Why I need that quick response time. It's the only thing I ask for. And feedback. If you say no, if you can give me like a one sentence why, so that way I can dial in my search criteria and get you better candidates, right? Just don't say no. That makes it hard for me to figure out what you want. And then of course, if they just continue to not get back to you, pass on cancer, not give you feedback, then that can be like, "Hey, Katerina, remember when we first met, you promised you would give me a quick response and also feedback, and I've gotten neither from you. So at this point, I'm just going to pause the search." Or if I want to, like, I can be like, "I've exhausted my search. I can't find any more candidates to fit your requirements," right? But that sort of thing. But as long as you kind of make an agreement up front, they'll understand, right?
Right. Makes sense. And,
Yeah.
with hiring managers maybe not getting back to even you, everyone's saying it now. Candidates aren't hearing back usually from companies. They're applying, they're getting ghosted, they're not hearing back. Are you seeing that as a trend that, is just widespread? Or is that because companies are just overwhelmed at this point? Like, as a recruiter, what do you think the issue is there? And are you seeing that?
Yeah, about candidates not hearing back from like jobs they applied to or interviews they went to. Yeah, it's kind of like if it's funny, like a lot of times people ask questions about recruiting. I'm like, well, pretend it's the context of dating, and it's very, very clear. It's like, "Hey, I had a good coffee with somebody and I haven't heard back yet, and like it's been like 12 days." It's like, well, what do you think, right? Like probably not going to move forward. Right. It's like, he's not that into you, she's not that into you, or whatever, right? Like they're not that into you. Same type of thing. It's like that's how it works. And so a lot of it is like behind the scenes. What a lot of people don't realize is hiring managers are slammed with like different pool of candidates, right? They have internal referrals that like, "Oh, this department manager recommends somebody that they have to like prioritize as an internal hire." So they have that pool of candidates. They have a whole bunch of online applicants. They post a job on LinkedIn or whatever, right? Or on your app, and they're getting all these candidates. Like, okay, now I need to go through those. And then they have recruiters who are like pitching them different candidates. So, and they don't have the resources to probably filter them out and qualify them. So they don't have the bandwidth to respond to like the rock stars, right? So if so if you're a rock star candidate, you'll get that rock star treatment. Now if you're getting like you're not getting back or you're not hearing responses, it might not mean that you're not a rock star. It might mean like the role's not a perfect fit for your background, or you're not selling yourself correctly, or there's different things that you can do to really present yourself in a way that someone will move fast with you, right? But like, yeah, it's like, I hate to say it, but like with dating, if it just keeps happening and no one's getting back to you, you keep getting ghosted, it's something that probably you can do to change that, right? It's not the world. So,
Oh,
or
makes sense.
right, or your standards are so high, you just want
Yes.
like the Brad Pitts of the world, right? And you're like,
Yeah.
nope, nothing less than the Brad Pitt, and you're like, okay, well, let's just adjust that a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Where you can still be happy and not marry Brad Pitt. So
Absolutely. You mentioned with working with local clients, that misconception. I think there's a lot of misconceptions with recruiters that, we'll touch on with, I think, just employers being overwhelmed to even work with recruiters. But what do you think that that's something that's changed post COVID, that people aren't necessarily needing the local? Like, was that something that people would be going in and visiting these businesses, having those inside meetings?
mm.
Or is that something that always a misconception that was just never really a local need there?
Yeah, so I assumed it was like important, right? Like back in the day, 10 years ago, I would show up to a hiring manager. I would bring a binder with, all these forms. Like I would fill out like this questions, and it's called a job order form. It's taking like an order like a McDonald's. Okay, what do you want? Like, what do you need? Like fries with that, right? Just taking all these notes, and then and shake their hand, and then schmooze, take them out to lunch. While I was in the office, I try to meet other hiring managers. Like, "Oh, hey, like is that like your other department heads? Can I meet them? Can you introduce me?" And I was just trying to kind of like get my foot in the door everywhere. And I thought that was a requirement. But then, especially after COVID, like I realized like they don't care. Like the hiring manager doesn't necessarily want to take an hour to meet with a recruiter and like have them like go and schmooze with their entire like department heads, right? Like that's not that. I would even like walk candidates into the office. So like if I got you an in-person interview, I would be like, cool candidate, let's meet at this. Oh my god, I used to do all meet. Let's meet at the Starbucks like across the street, half an hour before. I'll prep you. I'll walk you in. I'll introduce you. Like we would walk in candidates because then it would just be an excuse to get more face time with
Right.
hiring manager. And then while they're there, I'll be like, hey, I'll just kind of make small talk with or just so it took so much time. It was so inefficient, right? These days, like for sure, you don't need that. Like, yeah. So the thing that you do need though is kind of strength in recruiting in that niche. That's really all clients want to see. That like they say, hey, I'm looking for IT professionals with a cybersecurity background, and if you can kind of speak to that in a somewhat intelligible way, that they know that you like be based, down the street, but then recruit like accounting and finance, right? That's not as strong. So it's more about just like, can you, if you talk to a hiring manager as a recruiter, if they talk to you about their world, their ideal candidates, what they do, the projects, the technical skills, the requirements, the certifications, that sort of thing. If any of that goes over your head or your eyes starts to glaze over, like, like I'm losing them, the hiring manager will pick up on that pretty quickly. So then like for that reason it helps to really start off your recruiting business as like in a niche, right? We talk about like we have a 6-step process for starting your own recruiting business being successful, and the first step is pick a hyper focused niche, like so that we can be like, hey, like you ever been to a restaurant where they only serve like one thing, like this is a burger place, all they do burgers, no chicken burgers, no hot dogs, just a burger, and they do it so freaking well there's the line out the door, right? Versus like those Chinese restaurants with like a 12-page menu, right? Like nothing is that good. So you want to be like the burger place that has one thing and they're known for their best burger in town. So kind of you want to be known for being the best recruiter with this type of niche. And then once you get your foot in the door, you'll naturally get the opportunity to work on other roles too. It's more of like a get your foot in the door type of strategy.
Makes sense. So to speak
Yeah.
more to really pulling back the curtain on recruiting, let's say we're a company. Let's start with companies first, and they're in need of
Mhm.
candidates, and they want to use a recruiter. How does a company find the right recruiter for them? There's not this portal that says find me a recruiter.
Yeah.
So how do you find the right recruiting company agency that's going to be a right fit for you? What are the kind of questions, process? What does that look like?
Yeah. It's usually not that difficult because they'll find you. It's kind of like if you are an attractive company, recruiters will come reach out to you. If you're an attractive person, you go to the bar, people will just talk to you. You don't have to like go find. I'll just sit at the bar and just by myself for 10 minutes, and then people will come and talk to me, right? So, now of course, in that situation, the might not be the great quality that comes up and talks to you. Same thing, right? As a company, you might not have the best quality recruiters to come and talk to you. So, as a hiring manager, I would probably filter just based on one thing, which is like, does this recruiter have a track record of placing candidates in this niche? Like whatever role, if I'm looking for director of sales, like has this person place another director of sales or something similar, right? Now, of course, this might put a fear, and this actually kind of stops a lot of recruiters from branching out because they're like, what if I don't have a rock star candidate or I've never done this recruiting before? But if you can show up to a meeting with a hiring manager and actually like prepare by finding a couple candidates first and bring those resumes to the table, or in a Zoom call, have those resumes ready to like review. And then they'll be like, wow, like these actually, I know you mentioned you haven't done this director of sales role before, but you actually found some really good candidates, right? So you can kind of like bridge that gap just by like being prepared and bringing something to the table. But yeah, that's the biggest thing for hiring managers is finding people who are in your niche. So you can even type in, like, do a Google search, Yelp, that sort of thing, and find people with the right experience. But recruiters that are good are always reaching out to potential clients that they know are hiring, and they're always targeting clients in their niche. So usually it's never a lack of the right recruiters. It's actually filtering them out and finding the ones that you feel confident are going to deliver.
Okay. Now, what if you're an employee?
Yeah.
What if you're someone who's looking for work and you want a recruiter? And I know recruiters are constantly reaching out to people also. I think everyone would be lying if they said that they've never had a recruiter reach out to them on LinkedIn or somewhere. But how can
Sure.
you position yourself? Are you as a recruiter, what's attracting you to the right candidates? Is it the way their LinkedIn profile is set up? Is it where they're featured?
Mm.
What are you looking for? And what can people be doing to make sure recruiters are reaching out to them?
Yeah, I think the easiest way is just to kind of like keyword stuff your profile with the right keywords that people are searching for. Because as a recruiter, we're just typing in like job title equals like like sales account executive, like like keyword SaaS and AWS and right enterprise. Like just we're just typing little words and it's we're hitting search and it pops up and it filters it in order of who has the most keywords and that's the best fit. So if you can like so it's algorithm, right? So it's
Right.
so if you put the right things on there, you'll pop up first. And then so that's one. And then two is when we then like I look at the first dozen people, I'll then look at okay, all 12 people have the right keywords and terms, but I'll see who lists them in which order. So this is kind of a little tip here or insider tip. But so let's say if you are a programmer and you list like JavaScript, Java, Python, and then you keep listing like 12 other things, C++, like SQL, like Lotus, like random stuff. And my keyword shows up like number 8. I'm like, okay, this person like doesn't know how to use it. Like, she might have touched it once or like in college to like play with it. So it's really the first one or two things you list is like really what you know how to do, right? So now I'll look for people that like if I list 3 things that they list those 3 things first. I'm like, okay, they know how to do that. That's their main jam. Everything else is like a nice to have, which is why I think for people, even though it's like you want to keyword stuff your resume and LinkedIn profile, you want to make sure that you um, reorder them in the list of your strength. And when you're applying for a job, you can kind of like mess around, like reorder again based on the job. So like one job says, hey, I want Python first, Java second. Just kind of swap it. And then another job says I want Java first. And Python's a nice to have. Just swap it again. And then just make sure that of course in the back end you hustle and learn and level up your skills so that way you don't get fired when you show up. But you can kind of like put your best foot forward. And modify your resume to that job. Same thing for one last resume tip is like in addition to reordering your requirements and skill sets to match the exact job description, but if you put a title on the top of your resume, like that's really strong. I think a lot of candidates, especially people with a very broad interests and skills and experiences, like will have like an all-in-one resume that's like 2 pages and it's like, hey, I've done all these different things. Like that's terrible because then as a hiring manager, it is because as a hiring manager, I'm like, okay, I need an account executive that sells CRM solutions to the enterprise market. And this person has in sales, some marketing, some social media marketing. I'm like, and if I have to spend more than like 3 seconds on trying to connect the dots and figure out who you are, what's your life story, what you want to do, I'm like, this is like too outside the box. I'm just gonna pass. The next person says, and then let's say resume number 1, like a Jill of all trades. Resume number 2, it's like headline title says name, address, email, phone number. Below that says sales executive, parentheses enterprise CRM solutions. I'm like, whoa, I like what I see just in just the first like eighth of the title, first portion of the resume. And then when I go down, all your keywords, all your accomplishments are all about like selling in the CRM space in enterprise markets. Exactly what I'm looking at 80/20.
Makes sense, makes sense. So before we hear where our listeners can find you, the term Recruit Me, the app is called Recruit Me, the podcast is Recruit Me. What does that mean to you when you hear that? What do you think of when you hear Recruit Me?
Sure. I think like the everything I've been saying it kind of almost sounds like fairly aggressive in terms of like pushing things, like push it and be aggressive for what you want, right? Even if it means making up a job that's somewhat relevant that you can, like even means being a little creative, even if it means like, yeah, having 12 resumes and each of them like tailored, like it's being aggressive and going out and getting what you want and being like tenacious. So it's like, yeah. So when I see recruiting, I think recruit me, I don't think, okay, I'll just submit my resume, sit back and like let them come to me. I'm more like I'm gonna go out and get it, right? So so yeah, I think if those people and it works. Like when I was working at agency, if I had a good candidate, they would ping me like, hey John, like what else do you have for me? Or like I know that last job didn't work out. Do you have anything else? Right? Like the squeaky wheel does get the grease, right? So it's like, okay, like follow up. And people are like, well, I haven't heard back from the hiring manager, but well, have you followed up? Have you done this? Have you called your recruiter? Have you like looked for other recruiters at your agency? Right? When you reach out to a recruiting agency, there's probably like 5 recruiters. There's like one like rock star, like 2 are okay, and 2 like suck. Like find the one that's worked their longest. Like he or she has like the best pool like they have all the client, like go, so ask for that recruiter, hey, can I talk to John, like the guy that's been in for 12 years, like he probably knows some he can pick up the phone and get me an interview on the spot, I'm sure right? So you want to go like schmooze with that person, like lots of little things you can do that is outside the box that people like think you can't do, like walking into an agency and be like, hey, can I talk to John, like do that, like there's not a line of other people doing that, right? So and then the more you do that, the more, and if you're likable and skilled and professional and present well, lastly, like, yeah, recruit me is also, I think, like being like looking as good as you are. So like I'm sure a lot of your listeners, they know their skill, they know that they're talented, and given the right opportunity, they can really do well at a job. But when you talk to a recruiter or talk to a hiring manager, like they don't know you. So you have to look as good as you are, like in terms of not just physical appearance, like you walk to an interview, like being as polished as you can be, professionally dressed, how you speak, articulate. When you're on a Zoom call, have like lights and microphones, all this stuff that we have, right? Like that's the little stuff helps because, uh, yeah, especially to recruiters. A lot of people talk to recruiters and they think that like, I'll just like whatever, like just wing the call. But like as a recruiter, like when I talk to a candidate, I put you in like a bucket afterwards. I'm like, okay, are you in my like rock star? Are you a okay candidate? Or are you like I'm just gonna throw you in like the discard pile, right? Like, okay, I'm not going to work with this person, and I make that decision pretty quick, like within a couple of minutes. So if you make it to like I like this person rock star, like I'm gonna work my butt off to find her something. She's amazing. Like you want to like that. You want to be aligned. You want a recruiter to put you in that bucket. And if you come in sloppy or on the call, like you're not articulating well, I can tell you're distracted, you're multitasking, you're late, like whatever. I'm like, because then I in the back of my mind, I have like different tiers of clients. I have my rockstar clients. It's my A plus clients. So if you're an A plus candidate, I'm going to present you to my A plus candidate. If you come off and like as a B candidate, like I'm not going to risk upsetting my A plus client by submitting you. You're going to get my B clients. So you almost want to treat your meetings with the recruiter as if it was a live actual interview, because they can be your best friend very quickly and get you a job like that. Or you can go into their C candidate bucket and you only get to see opportunities, and you'll never know, because we'll just be like, hey, this is the best client for you, and we're also gonna tell you this is the best client that we have, but like it's really not, right? So I know
Really cool if I know.
your
Oh my
expression.
God. It's important.
I feel bad. I
No,
feel
no,
bad. I'm
it's
saying all this
important. It's
crazy
important.
stuff, and your face is like, oh my god, like what
No,
is
no, no. It is
what?
important because it really is what you're saying, that
Yeah,
you have to put yourself out there and you have to treat every interaction appropriately. And I think what you said hits the nail on the head. I think people sometimes just think, this person has to help me out. They want to get paid, they want to get their fee, but at the end of the day, there's
yeah.
options there for them too. So you have to make sure that you're presenting yourself the way that, it would be. Your interview starts from the minute you're talking to a recruiter. So I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, and not even that, like even just like your friends who are like, and a lot of times, yeah, with recruiters, like we take a risk every time we submit a candidate. If it's not a good fit, if they every time we get a no from a client, that lowers our like, our good our standing with them. So we're taking a risk every time we submit a candidate. So we're not gonna take that risk unless we know for certain, like, or that we feel very, very good about you, very confident. Same thing for like people who ask for referrals. Oh, I asked my friend, Jeff, to like hook me up with, because he works at a great company, they're hiring. And so like you almost have, but you can't just take that nonchalantly. You almost have to like present to your friend as if you were like, it's kind of weird, but like really like have the perfect resume already. Like say, hey, like can we have a meeting and talk about this, and like almost like treat it seriously, for them to be like, you know what, wow, okay, this person's serious. They sent me a polished resume. They researched the company. Um, and then that person, because then whenever your friend will vouch for you, like vouch for somebody, like they're taking a career risk too. If their boss is like, get out of here, this person looks like a joke, like, are you crazy, right? Or I met with them and just like never send me people again, right? Like I'm not, like, that person is going to lose standing in their career. So everyone's taking a risk out there in the world when they're like, representing you or doing you a favor or anything. So it's like, I like to make it easy for people. Like I like to look good, be right, like have everything ready, be prepared, like so that way it's like, okay, because now not a lot of people do this. So if you do even like half of this, you're going to be way ahead of the curve in terms of like just putting your best foot forward. So
Yeah. Thank you so much, John. This was a fantastic. I really appreciated pulling back the curtain. I
Mhm.
know our listeners can find you on Instagram. Your team is doing a fantastic job, and also on LinkedIn. So we'll make sure that I put any of your links in the podcast information on the
Yeah,
YouTube channel so that people can continue to follow along. But I can't thank you enough for
yeah,
really being as candid as you were. So we really know as employees, as
yeah,
companies, what to expect from
yeah,
recruiters.
yeah. Absolutely, it's been really fun. Thanks, Katerina.
Thank you.
Take care.
Goodbye, everyone. Continue to recruit yourself.